All right, let's jump right in, shall we? Today, we're diving deep into the story of Joseph and his brothers.
Oh, this one, it's a roller coaster.
It really is. We're talking family drama, ancient customs, betrayal.
And some pretty amazing displays of divine intervention.
We'll be using Michael Hunt's Bible study lesson as our guide.
A great resource, by the way, for anyone wanting to unpack all the layers of the story.
Definitely. So, to start, we meet Joseph, the favored son, the one with that fabulous decorated tunic.
Ah, yes, that tunic. Not just any old piece of clothing, though, was it?
Not at all. It was a symbol of authority, right?
Practically a billboard that said, favorite son. Can you imagine the sibling rivalry?
I mean, we've all felt those pangs of jealousy, right? But this story takes it to a whole new level.
Oh, absolutely. And then we have those vivid dreams.
Don't forget, not one but two dreams, where everyone's bowing down to him.
Talk about adding fuel to the fire. Back then, dreams, especially recurring ones, were seen as messages from God.
So these dreams pretty much seal Joseph's fate with his brothers.
Right. They're already jealous, and now they think he's got divine backing to rule over them.
Bad combo.
No kidding. So while tending their flocks, they come up with a plan.
And here's where we see their rebellious streak. They were supposed to be near Shechem.
They stray, end up miles away in Dothan.
And it's there that Joseph, the good son, is sent by his dad to check on them.
Talk about walking into a trap.
Seriously, his brothers see him coming and decide, well, let's just say it gets dark.
They want him gone.
Thankfully, Reuben, the oldest, tries to intervene.
Suggests tossing him in a dry well instead.
But his motives, a little unclear. Could be genuine concern, or maybe a way to make up for past mistakes.
It makes you think, doesn't it, about our own motives sometimes?
It does. Then, as if on cue, a caravan of Ishmaelites shows up, heading to Egypt.
And Judah sees a way to profit from the situation.
Yeah, instead of murder, they sell Joseph into slavery.
Chilling, isn't it? How quickly greed can override family.
For 20 shekels of silver, no less, the going rate for a slave.
So they cover their tracks.
Take that precious tunic, stain it with goat's blood, like a wild animal attack.
And Jacob, their father, the ultimate deceiver himself, falls for it. Hook, line, and sinker.
It's heartbreaking.
Mm-hmm.
But then the story shifts. We suddenly move to Judah and his family.
It seems random, but trust me, this is where things get even more complicated.
This part dives into some heavy stuff. Family duty, ancient marriage customs.
The Levirate marriage, to be precise, a widow had to marry her husband's brother to ensure an heir.
Right, so Judah's son, Er, dies, leaving his wife, Tamar, childless.
Judah tells his other son, Onan, to do his duty.
But Onan, well, he's not exactly a stand-up guy, avoids having children with Tamar to protect his inheritance.
Doesn't end well for him, let's just say that.
So now, Judah stalls, tells Tamar to wait until his youngest son is old enough.
But of course, he never intends to follow through.
Tamar realizes this, and in that society, a childless widow, she had no future.
So she takes a huge risk.
Disguises herself and, well, orchestrates an encounter with Judah.
Who has absolutely no idea it's her.
She even demands a pledge. His seal, cord, and staff. Symbols of authority back then.
Bold move, for sure.
Months later, Tamar's pregnant.
And Judah, he's furious, wants her punished.
Adultery was a major offense.
But just as things look bleak, Tamar drops the truth bomb, produces the pledge, proving Judah is the father.
Wow, talk about a plot twist.
Judah's caught, exposed, has to admit his hypocrisy.
And Tamar gives birth to twins, Perez and Zerah.
And guess what? Perez, the younger twin, is born first.
We're definitely seeing a theme here, aren't we?
That we are. And this detail matters because Perez will become an ancestor of King David.
And ultimately, of Jesus.
Pretty amazing how it all connects.
Right. So we've seen Judah deal with some messy situations, but now let's circle back to Joseph.
Oh, poor Joseph. Sold into slavery, now languishing in an Egyptian prison.
But even there, even in that darkness, the source reminds us, Yahweh was with Joseph.
Powerful, isn't it? Even when things seem hopeless, God's presence, his plan, is still unfolding.
And that plan starts to take shape when two of Pharaoh's officials end up in prison with Joseph.
The cupbearer and the baker both have some pretty disturbing dreams.
And word gets around that Joseph can interpret dreams.
Even in prison, his reputation spreads.
It's like he's got this gift he can't hide.
And he interprets both dreams accurately.
The cupbearer gets his job back. The baker, not so lucky.
And wouldn't you know it, 3 days later, it all happens just as Joseph predicted.
Talk about validation. But here's the kicker. The cupbearer, He forgets about Joseph.
Talk about taking someone for granted.
So frustrating.
It really is, but it happens, right? We help someone, and they move on without a second thought.
And Joseph's left there in prison, his talents wasted. But hey, that's what we'll pick up next time.
Oh, things are about to get very interesting. Stay tuned.
So last time we left Joseph, well, let's just say things weren't looking so good for him.
Stuck in prison, forgotten. It's tough to see someone with so much potential, just wasting away.
Right, but that's when things take a turn.
Pharaoh starts having these crazy dreams.
Crazy is an understatement. I mean, 7 healthy cows getting gobbled up by 7 scrawny ones.
And then the plump ears swallowed by these, withered ones.
Like something out of a horror movie.
You'd be losing sleep too, right?
Totally. And none of Pharaoh's advisors can figure them out.
Until finally someone remembers Joseph.
It's almost comical, right? It takes a national crisis, these bizarre dreams, for the cupbearer to finally have that aha moment.
Talk about good timing, I guess.
Seriously. So Joseph gets whisked away from prison, and what a change of scenery, right?
One minute you're in a dungeon, the next you're in the palace.
Standing before Pharaoh himself.
Talk about pressure.
But Joseph handles it all with amazing grace. He acknowledges that only God can give the true meaning.
But he's willing to be the messenger.
And he lays it all out. 7 years of plenty, followed by 7 years of famine.
It's not just the interpretation, though, is it?
No. Joseph, he doesn't just deliver bad news. He actually offers a solution.
A plan to stockpile grain during the good years, right? To prepare for what's coming.
Genius. He's like this ancient economic advisor.
Pharaoh is blown away.
He sees that there's something special about Joseph. Can we find another man like this? He says. One in whom is the Spirit of God.
High praise indeed. And that's how Joseph goes from prisoner to, well, basically the second most powerful man in Egypt.
Talk about a career change. And he jumps right in, organizing everything, making sure the grain is stored properly.
And when the famine hits, Egypt is ready.
Meanwhile, back in Canaan, Joseph's brothers, they're struggling.
The famine has hit them hard.
So they head to Egypt for help, for food.
Unaware that the man in charge, the one with all the grain, is
Their brother.
It's classic, isn't it?
It really is.
Yeah.
But Joseph, he doesn't reveal himself right away. He wants to test them.
See if they've changed, if they regret what they did.
Accuses them of being spies, demands they bring their youngest brother Benjamin as proof.
It's a high-stakes game he's playing.
Emotionally charged, for sure. Their father, Jacob, he's still heartbroken over losing Joseph, doesn't want to let Benjamin go.
But the famine forces his hand.
So they return to Egypt with Benjamin.
And that's when Joseph, he can't hold back any longer.
The reveal, I mean, it must have been intense.
Shocking, for sure. To see the brother they thought they'd lost, now ruling over Egypt.
Talk about guilt.
But Joseph, he reassures them. He says he doesn't blame them.
Can you imagine, after everything they put him through?
He actually says, even though you intended to do harm to me, God intended it for good.
Powerful words.
It shows a depth of faith and understanding that even in the darkest moments, God has a plan.
And that plan, well, it involves saving his family.
He invites them to come live in Egypt under his protection.
And this part always gets me. When they first went to Egypt, remember, they found the silver they paid for the grain hidden back in their sacks.
Like a secret refund. A quiet act of kindness.
This speaks volumes about Joseph's character, doesn't it?
He could have held a grudge, could have sought revenge, but...
He chooses forgiveness, chooses to move forward.
Beautiful.
So we've seen Joseph rise from slavery to power, go through these incredible trials, and in the end, find reconciliation with his family.
But the story, well, it doesn't end there.
There's still more to uncover. What happens to Joseph's family in Egypt? And what about God's promise to Abraham? We'll find out in part 3. Welcome back. We're in the final stretch of our Joseph saga. Last time, things were looking up for him and his family, but as we know, with these ancient stories, there's always another twist coming, right?
Oh, there's definitely more to come. So the family settled in Goshen. It's this fertile area, perfect for their flocks, herds, their whole way of life.
And Joseph, he's still this high-ranking official, basically keeping Egypt afloat during the famine.
Yeah, he's saving lives. You'd think they'd be eternally grateful, right?
You'd think.
Yeah.
But time passes, and a new pharaoh takes over.
Yeah.
And this guy, well, he doesn't remember Joseph, doesn't care about all he did.
It's almost like that cupbearer incident all over again, isn't it?
Totally. Out of sight, out of mind. And this pharaoh, he sees the growing Israelite population as a problem.
Starts to feel threatened, I guess.
And he does what many insecure rulers do.
He enslaves them. forces them into hard labor.
Talk about a slap in the face, right? After all Joseph did for Egypt.
It's a brutal turn of events, but, if we look at the bigger picture, this actually aligns with God's promise to Abraham.
Way back in the beginning, God told Abraham that his descendants would become a great nation, but
But first, they'd face hardship, oppression, in a foreign land.
in this period of slavery, as awful as it is, it's part of that journey.
It's during these trials, that the Israelites will forge their identity, their reliance on God.
So even in the darkness, there is a glimmer of hope.
Absolutely. Now let's jump ahead. Joseph, he lives a long life, 110 years. But before he dies, he makes his brothers promise something.
He tells them, when God brings you out of this land, you got to take my bones with you.
It's like he's saying, don't forget me. Don't forget where you came from. And don't forget God's promise to take you back to your homeland.
It's this powerful reminder, this connection to the past.
And the text even mentions, how Joseph's body is embalmed, placed in a coffin, Egyptian style.
Shows how he was integrated into Egyptian society, but still held on to his roots.
Exactly. And centuries later, when Moses leads the Israelites out of Egypt, they remember.
They actually carry Joseph's bones with them.
It's like they're bringing a piece of their history, their identity, back to the promised land.
And eventually those bones are buried there, in their homeland.
Fulfilling Joseph's final wish. It's beautiful, really.
It really is. The story of Joseph, it's this epic tale of faith, forgiveness, and ultimately hope.
It reminds us that God can work through anything, even the toughest situations, the betrayals, the years of struggle, to achieve his purpose.
And sometimes, like with Joseph, it takes time. But we see how God's plan unfolds, and good triumphs over evil.
Absolutely. It leaves us with a lot to think about, though, doesn't it? Like, how can we hold on to our integrity, our faith, when things get rough?
How do we forgive, like Joseph did? And how can we see God's hand in our own lives, even when it doesn't make sense at the time?
Big questions, for sure.
One's worth pondering. Well, thanks for joining us on this incredible deep dive into the world of Joseph. It's been a journey.
Right.